Welcome back to the loading zone. Today's deep thought: trucks have big wheels. Welcome to Brake Check, where we don't do fluff. We don't do talking points, and we certainly don't give out participation trophies. I'm taking a little time to recharge the batteries this week, but before anybody starts celebrating, we dug through the episodes that you watched, you shared, and you kept talking about long after they aired. These aren't simply reruns. These are the conversations that hit the hardest. They changed minds, started arguments, and in some cases, made people really uncomfortable, which is usually where you know you're on to something. So buckle up, buttercups. It's time to run it back. Here's a few Brake Check favorites. If you're serious about protecting your money and running smarter in today's industry, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow FreightWaves and Brake Check for all your top freightcast, freight news, and anything happening in trucking today. Also, make sure to go to F3 Future Freight Festival, Freight Tech's main stage, the leaders you need, the access and connections you want, right here in Chattanooga. Use Take 20 to save 20% off your current pricing. That's right, Take 20. Save some money today. Now we're going to go into the news. Here's some things that I found on social media that just make you smile and make you scratch your head all at the same time.
The cowboy operator. There's a lot of things that could be said about this type of operator. Endangers himself and everyone around.
It's the little things you lean on that long and lonesome night, like laying on the air horn when the children give that sign, and then it's three turns for good measure. Mama's sweet and fine. Just the little things you lean on that long and lonesome night.
Let's go to a shout out from our sponsors over at Hey Bubba.
Hi, I'm Bubba, the one and only voice AI that solves all your trucking needs. Whether it's dispatch, managing fleet, or negotiating, I can handle it all. With just one command, I can make 10 parallel calls to brokers and negotiate the best rates for you. And it doesn't stop there. I can auto-book the ideal load for you in less than 10 minutes, so that you can focus on driving while I handle everything else. Come, let's work together. Try me out for free at bubba.ai.
Up first, we're going to bring Michael Kroul. He's the CEO and attorney and a freight operator, which means he runs the numbers, reads the contracts, and lives in the chaos. Michael Kroul is the CEO of KTI, a Minneapolis-based transportation broker that has been moving freight since 1997 through a network of 15,000 contracted carriers spanning truckload, LTL, drayage, and intermodal. He's grown his company 300% in revenue, earned three straight spots on Inc. magazine's fastest growing companies list, and in 2024 closed a strategic partnership with Con Global to build a true one-stop solution for shippers. He's not sugarcoating shit. Michael, welcome to Brake Check. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, Charles. Thanks for having me. Really great to see you. And what a show. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. So you and I have known each other for a while. We kind of trauma bonded over our passion for the industry and the people of the industry, but we sit on two completely different sides of the
Right.
industry. And I think that's one of the reasons that makes our conversation so intriguing and invigorating is we get to see it from two different lenses. So I'm excited to share that to everyone that's tuning in today.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks again for having me. Excited to chat with you.
So let's talk about running a 3PL. Spot rates are what they are. Shippers' budgets are tight. Carriers are desperate for loads. Is a non-asset broker a gift or a trap in today's world?
I think, it's very cyclical. And I think some days it's a gift, some days it's a trap. We've spent a lot of time navigating, I think, after the big rush of 22, navigating this market change. And I will say that our brokerage is a little different in that we use a lot of small to mid-sized carriers, especially on our drayage side, which is a larger portion of our business. And so we have had to work with and deal with these up and down cycles of all these carriers with insurance and rates and capacity issues, both on when it was a little easier to move, which we all know it has been for years, including now when it's gotten a little more difficult and capacity has changed. So it's been very, very invigorating. As you know, on whatever side of logistics you sit, it's always challenging every day.
Every day is a new day and every day has new challenges. There is no shortage of challenges. But you got 15,000 carriers in your network. How do you actually know who's going to show up and perform versus the ones just filling a lane on paper?
So, for us, we're pretty blessed. As you said, we've been around almost 30 years, and we're also one of the almost oldest, I think now, one of the top 3 oldest drayage brokers out there. We've done since '04. And so for us, the success really has been direct relationship with carriers, direct relationship with drivers, getting to know them. So, we are very blessed that we have some 10, 15, and 20 plus year relationships with carriers. And so of all those carrier bases that we use, there are some that are spot when you're still doing backhauls, but for the most part, we're using a connected network of carriers where they know their business, we know their families, we know what lanes that work for them, and we really try to work in a partnership. And I would say that's even amplified even more on the drayage side, because in drayage, you have really a community of companies and drivers that are working in a particular market. They're always in Chicago, or they're always in Atlanta, or they're always in Memphis, or they're always at the port. And so for that as well, we have a very deep relationship. So I think for us, the way we navigate it really is kind of how we're all navigating through these times, which is having real relationships and real talk.
Well, that's crazy. Having real relationships. Trucking started out as a relationships-based business. Then it became very transactional. And I'm seeing the return of the relationship-driven side of freight. And the ones that are having a better time than others typically have some strong relationships.
100%. I can tell you, Charles, for our company, and we're a mid-sized broker, we have grown every year since 2022. 23, 24, 25. We just had the best first quarter in our history. We have the same customers, the same carrier base. We haven't changed anything. And I think it's the ability to focus on the way you operate, using tools to obviously operate better, but not forgetting, quite frankly, where you came from and who got you there. And I think that's been really successful for us, both on the carrier side as well as the shipper customer side.
Now, brokers took a lot of heat during the rate spike years. They've been accused of gouging carriers, not passing value onto the shippers and the carriers. What's your honest answer as a brokerage to that? Obviously, I don't see you in a diamond-plated microphone, so.
Not yet, but I do think that the truth is for us, our margin percentage really hasn't changed in all those period of times. I think the difference was the pressure on shippers and customers. If you look at the data now that truckers and shippers and brokers have access to, everybody now has actual equal data. I think it's very easy for a shipper to know exactly what they should pay for a certain lane now. And as well as the trucker to know what that lane is paying. And so I think that the pressure came from all sides. I can say that in 22, I think at the speed in which the market turned right after COVID and the speed at which capacity turned, I think there were very, very, there was enough capacity and rates that both truckers and brokers all rose. And I think the last couple of years, you haven't seen that. And I don't think a lot of brokers really focused on the same things they focused during COVID because there was excess capacity. So yeah, I do think it's out there. And I'd be lying to say if we didn't have some lanes probably where we probably should have given a little more money to the carrier side. However, In our business, with the majority being drayage, we have to have those relationships throughout the cycle. And so for us, because there's a limited amount of chassis, a limited amount of drivers in a particular market, we have to, by the nature and economics of our business, quote, share the opportunities with our carrier partners because we need them to be there when it's tight. When we had Eid holiday in Chicago 2 weeks ago on that Wednesday, Chicago drayage was at a standstill because of all the amount of Muslim drivers in that market. But because of our relationships, because we didn't, quote, as you said, gouge our carrier partners all those years, we had access to some capacity that maybe other brokers did not.
Now, you're a lawyer running a brokerage. How much of your edge
Don't
comes
hang
from
up.
understanding?
Don't hang up on me.
Hopefully you're not billing me.
Fair enough.
But how much of your edge comes from understanding contract and liability better than most operators who never really had the training to read that fine print and understand how the intricacies of that works?
I personally, I think it's a huge advantage. I think it's a huge advantage when I'm talking to customers about risk, when I'm talking strategy. I cannot tell you how many emails or calls I've been on talking to our customer base regarding the SCOTUS ruling and what that means in that discussion. So I think it helps. I think working with somebody who's a lawyer, as conservative as I am on running a business, can be a negative, right? Because I'm not really as risk prone as maybe other leaders in our business. Our goal is not to scale at all costs. And I think that we are almost like, I don't want to say like the slow as the turtle, but if you look at our revenue charts, we've grown every year slowly and we really haven't tried to scale at all costs. So I think for the business, the safety and the risk compliance of the business has been a huge advantage. I have a lot of really good friends that really run transportation law for our community, both in-house lawyers as well as litigation lawyers. So I get a really good window and sense of how to run a business, risk, and being risk averse. And I also think it helps us understand exactly the risks we're taking for these opportunities and reading through those contracts. So I look at it as a real blessing and very happy that I can use that side of my brain every now and then to help the company.
I like that you're using it for good, unlike all the billboard lawyers that have led us down the path that we're currently on. So digital freight platforms keep saying that they're going to automate what all brokers do. What do you see the 3PL brokerage model being in 5 years or 10 years? Is the threat real? Are we going to be talking to AI to book loads, or is the human element still going to be very relevant?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think we're all inundated with AI and AI companies and what they're doing, and I think we've all read articles pro and con. But without a doubt, the AI product is a good one for our industry. It really can, what we're seeing, what it can do is really automate some of the menial tasks that our team are operating on, and we have a smaller team, and so we expect a lot more from our employees. So we look at it as a positive. I do think. I don't know if you remember when blockchain was all the rage and we were all going to be blockchain. I do think that in some way AI is underperforming and the expectations need to be leveled a little bit. But, I do think that eventually we're all going to be connecting to systems. And I think that a lot of this will be automated. Do I think the role of the broker has value? I think it always will have value, just like a travel agent, right? Everything's automated now, but still people use travel agents to help mitigate through all of the various risk, all the various knowledge you need. And I do think that we're going to have value in the future in 5 to 10 years. I just think we're going to be adjusting and hopefully for the better. So I'm kind of in the middle. I'm impressed with some of the movement. I think we have a ways to go. And I think it's going to take the entire industry to really get us to that standard. Shippers, customers, BCOs, freight forwarders, carriers, truck providers, LTL providers, terminals, ports. And I think once we start getting all connected, I think we'll see a much smoother supply chain. So I'm pretty optimistic of the future.
Now, we talked partnerships and how relationships and partnerships really drive freight. You partnered with Con Global in 2024. Give the audience in plain language, what does a shipper actually get that they couldn't get before because of this partnership?
So I think it really was looking at the things that we're really good at and the things that Con Global is really good at. And we really found we've had a long relationship with them. We have a division of domestic intermodal trucks in a separate company, a sister company, and they have a really close relationship with that company as well. And so we started talking to them about how we can provide their customers and our customers a lot more options in domestic, small box, and big box opportunities. And so it really gave us a network of real estate and access to various terminals around the country to really offer more services. So it really gives the customer a lot more options on how they are distributing their freight, how they're transacting their business, both from the point of manufacture all the way to the distribution in or out of the United States. So it gave us some levers, additional levers that we can pull. We're very lucky, Charles, that we work with Fortune 100 companies, and we work directly with BCOs, the beneficial cargo owner of the product. And so we're allowed to then go further upstream with them in their strategy and planning. So it allows us to really use a lot of the great opportunities that Con Global has, as well as Con Global giving their customers some more options, whether it's domestic intermodal, small box, trucking, or some non-asset options to use our carrier base when capacity and cycles change. So we're seeing it as a long-term opportunity. It's helping us get into other markets. It's helping them appease their current customers in current markets and in future markets. So it really has been about, they're much larger than we are, but it really has given both of us a little opportunity to get the expertise of each entity and really try to break down these logistic silos to allow us to get best efforts for everybody moving forward. And it's been a great partnership. They're a great company to work with. And, obviously they do some amazing work. So we're really happy of it, and we hope it can continue.
Now, a lot of times people say the benefit of a broker is shippers want one throat to choke. Are you building towards that, or is KTI still fundamentally a network play where carrier is the real relationship and the shipper is just kind of one of those auxiliary relationships that drive it?
So I guess the answer would be we're not trying to be one-stop shop for everybody. I think to do that, I don't really know many companies, and I'm including the largest of the largest trucking companies and the largest of the largest brokers. I don't think anyone is the one-stop shop. I think everybody can do things okay to amazing, and some brokers and trucking companies are able to do more than others. So, for us, I think our push, our specialization is drayage. And we do that, I would say, as good as any other company out there. There are companies that are larger than us, and there are companies that are smaller than us. But I can tell you that we've never lost a load because of service to a competitor, ever. It might be because of rate. It might be directly to a truck, but we've never lost to a competitor. And that is because for us, Charles, service has always been the only factor that separates us from everyone else. Let's be honest. Logistics it's a truck, it's a product, it's a highway, it's a very trained driver, and it's getting paid really good value for that move. And most everybody can figure out how to do that. How to do that very well, how to do that while building trust, how to do that providing service and solutions is something we pride on. So I think for us, the carrier relationship in our ability is still very important, especially on the drayage side. And on the truckload side, a lot of times, because we do a lot of commodity-based freight, it's on the lower spectrum of cost. We do have to work through the boards. We do have to work through our internal network on the spot side. So again, it's still carrier-based because we have to convince the carrier to take that load that might be a little less money because of what they're hauling or the value. So we kind of play both sides on that. I hope that answers it. Maybe a little too long on the end.
No, that was fantastic. And we're going to shift gears. We're going to talk about the market right now. So you've run KTI through 2008, COVID, the rate spike, and now whatever this is. What's generally different about this recent downturn, and what's exactly the same based on past experience?
So this has been a combination of a lot of things, and I think, what we're seeing today, and I was just on a call this week on an investor call with a large investment bank about this, with much larger brokers and carriers than we are. And I think at the end of the day, we're not seeing volume increase a lot. We're seeing rates increase and capacity go down. And I'm sure you've talked or read about all the reasons, right? Political reasons, geopolitical reasons for that. So, we're seeing right now a difference. And then the market shifted very quickly, probably started in fourth quarter, where we started seeing a difference where capacity pockets were happening. We've had a decrease recently on some of the import. We've had an increase on some cross-border, an increase on some flatbed and some other construction material stuff, which has shifted market and capacity. We've had drivers leave the industry. We had a lot of drivers come in on the industry during COVID. When we had COVID and we had a lot of that stuff happening, we had a ton of drivers leaving drayage to get into the truckload market. We had a ton of drivers coming into the market. A lot of these non-domiciled CDLs were spiking during that time, before and after that time, and still had their CDL. And so we saw a different market. This has been very different for a couple of reasons. We have insurance theft, cargo theft, and fraud is really through the roof, and it's organized and it's intelligent. and it's verified carriers. It's people buying actual MC numbers just to do harm, which is a newer thing. We're seeing a lot of very advanced AI being used to help do cargo theft. We're seeing less capacity on the road, less drivers on the road. We're seeing a shift of volumes. We're seeing a decrease in imports, which is hopefully picking back up. And it's been very quick. We're seeing the spike of oil. I mean, the spike of oil and gas because of all of the geopolitical issues. I mean, gas has been a little muted the last 3 weeks, Charles, but it's still $2 a gallon more than it was last year at the same time.
Yeah, those headlines have a funny way of like coming back full circle, but people have stopped talking about it for a while, but it doesn't change the reality that it's still higher and it's still a cost. And we live in a day and age where small carriers are being crushed by costs. With that, and being that you're a brokerage, is your carrier network shrinking, or are you picking up some carriers that are just desperate for any load they can get? Are people starting to realize that it might not be the market that they hoped it was going to be?
I think, first off, I think the small and mid-sized carriers have been crushed and decimated. I think, you had a lot of consolidation on the big carriers coming in, even the big domestic intermodal carriers that were doing a lot coming in and using less owner operators and bringing them into their network when things were getting hot and heavy. And a lot of those insurance costs, as you know, and I'm sure you've talked about in your show, rubber, right? Gas, insurance, all of the costs have gone up, not in proportion to the inflation into the rates not going up, right? And even today, even with these elevated rates, I think for the small trucker, it's a crisis mode. And for all the trucking companies who have made it this far, they're still trying to get out of this hole. So I think it's still desperate times, even with this rate increase. The good news is, I think that we're going to see some, and again, I'm not an economist. As you said, I'm a lawyer, so everyone should probably hang up. But, I think that we're going to see a stability of rates at least through fourth quarter. And so I think that for companies that are using tools to operate as lean as they can, you can't change the world, but you can change your lane. You can change some small steps to do it. I think that you're going to see some green shoots. They're going to allow some carriers now to get back more on their feet. But I don't think the volume's increased as much as the capacity's decreased. And I think that's an opportunity for a lot of drivers. We're also seeing a lot of drivers leave the drayage market to go back into truckload right now. How many drivers do that will also affect the opportunities for those small and mid-sized carriers.
So let's talk about that for a minute. Like, what's the honest move for a small carrier right now? Is it find a good broker, go direct, or just get out altogether? Like, based on what you're seeing, what's your advice to them?
I mean, all of the above, right? I think it depends on what market you're in and where you're living, right? I mean, if you are in a great lane, Chicago to Atlanta, any of those lanes, those really good lanes we can talk about, you've got competition, but you have the ability to hopefully operate. The trick is, how do you operate per mile less than your competitor, right? And that's a hard trick to do when you don't have the buying power. There are brokers and there are companies and trucking companies, and there are opportunities where you can lease on, or you can work with brokers that have a program. I know one very large broker that has a program for drivers where they're part of a very large trucking company, and they get access to insurance rate opportunities and discounted fuel and tires. And so if you can find a great lane that works for you, working with a large entity that can help support you with saving some money, there's opportunity there. If you're trying to just go back on the road and randomly get, lanes and end up here and look for the load there, I think that's getting to be a little harder, and you become a little more dependent on some of these larger market networks to supply that for you. And with the rates increased a little bit, you can get there. But remember, this is all a cycle. And so if you can only live when the rates are really high, and you could only live right now, then you're going to have a problem maybe in 4 or 5 months. So right now, I think the getting's good. And I think it's also at the same time, you got to think about first quarter and second quarter and how you're going to ride this cycle as it moves.
Now, you grew KTI substantially, even in those peaks. I think one of them was like 75% a year at a peak. What does responsible growth look like, and what should people learn from trying to grow too fast?
So it was my team. I was just part of the team that did that. But I think for us, it was once we found our niche, which was drayage, and this is before COVID. So before everyone else was really doing a lot of drayage, there maybe were 3 brokers, maybe 4 doing a lot of drayage before COVID, and then everyone and their mother got in, which actually helped us scale, because when it got a little difficult or when the service levels got a little higher, it wasn't so easy of just making a phone call and the carrier would handle everything. So we lost some major scale there. But we also were able to scale in our period. And so I think for us, the way that we handled it was we focused on the relationship. We did not focus 100% on the incoming opportunity. So we didn't turn all of our dollars into dialers or emailers to do marketing. We really focused on wallet share growth. And actually that growth with wallet share plus the referral network from that was a lot quicker turnaround to elevate beyond the first load to try than the cold call getting lucky scenario. On the flip side, there's an amazing broker that blew up during COVID by doing the opposite strategy, and they scaled one of the fastest scaling brokers of all time, and they did a lot of it on drayage, and they did a great job. So I don't think, quite frankly, Charles, there's one formula that works for everybody. We happen to have a lot of Fortune 100 customers that we did a little business with, and we just got more aggressive on using their reputation to grow within their network and to grow within their carrier and their transportation partners to get referrals. And that's kind of how we scaled. Because they were already large customers, it was large impact of opportunity that helped us scale quickly. So no secret sauce, just taking advantage of the opportunities that are around us and trying to execute them at 110%.
No, I love that. I love when everyone's just transparent about it. A lot of people try to treat success as the recipe to the Big Mac sauce, and it's just not. Like sometimes it's very fundamental. It's being transparent. It's working through partnerships. It's being a good partner. That's something a lot of people fail to capitalize on. They just treat it very transactionally. But I'm going to bring your hard question on deck right now. So for your hard stop question, you went to law school. You could be billing people $500+ an hour. Instead, you're at a freight brokerage. There's a lot of digital platforms on the rise. What does a freight broker today need to stay ahead of those digital platforms 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What sets them apart from them?
I think a digital platform is a part of supply chain. It isn't the supply chain. And so I think we proved that with Convoy. We proved that with Uber Freight. I mean, they've grown. They're not that profitable. It's going to take a lot of partnerships to get them to that point. And I think they're going to do very well, by the way. I think Uber Freight's great. I think Convoy was great. I was a huge fan of them and got to know the team really well. But the reality is it takes a lot more than just having the digital platform, just like it takes a lot more than just having an AI platform, right? I mean, a lot of people go into ChatGPT, but you still have to either put something in ChatGPT or edit it once it's out of ChatGPT, right? If you're sending just what's coming out of ChatGPT, you're not going to last that long in any field. And so I think the same thing towards this. If you are consistently providing value, right? For us, the value is our expertise in drayage and our multi-year relationships with both carriers and customers. If you're able to digitize that, right, and that's still going well, I think you can compete with the all digital platforms. If you're using tools, just like a lot of very successful brokers are doing now, that are much smaller. We don't have $1 million digital budget, and we're able to compete. As long as you're finding tools to execute that process where the customer is getting the benefit of it, I think you will always compete. I don't think that there's doom and gloom. I do think that it's going to be a fundamental change bigger than brokers and carriers where you're looking at digital taking over everything. And that's going to be probably pushed, quite frankly, by the shippers. And you look at Amazon right now, Charles, you look what they're starting to do, right? They're starting to try to internalize most of their supply chain now. A lot of other companies have done that. There are ship lines that bought brokers during COVID to think, we're just going to have a brokerage, and most of them failed. Some of them have bought 3 brokerages because the first one didn't do well. So it's not just digital, it's not just buying, it's not just cash. It takes a combination of things to really succeed. And I think that that's going to be important, although altered and different in the future. But I do think that there's opportunities 5 to 10 years in the future. I do think that it's not just going to be the big brokers out there. I do think we're seeing a shift right now because of some recent political and judicial events. But I do think that it's not going to be fundamentally changed.
Are you referring to SCOTUS?
Yeah, I mean, as I could say, as an executive, been in this business for over 20 years, and reading the opinion and know what it says, and watching, at the end of the day, Charles, and because you talk on the show with bluntness, sex doesn't sell anymore, so fear does, right? Fear sells, and I think that is why we're getting if you need the clicks and you need the links and you need all that stuff, you got to talk about all these really crazy, scary things. And I think that this SCOTUS thing was just another opportunity to really get out there and make things seem a little harder or crazier than it is. And unfortunately, the effect is not going to be a positive one. We're going to see some changes because of that, and not all for the good. But yeah, SCOTUS.
Well, Michael, I appreciate you coming on Break Check, and I'm sure we're going to see as things progress a lot of changes. I don't think that administration is done moving fast, and in trucking we move fast and break shit all the time, so we'll be covering it quite a bit. But I appreciate you taking the time to come over here and share your perspective.
Take care. Thank you. I appreciate it. Take care, Charles. Bye.
Do you want to grow your fleet but get buried by paperwork, slow hiring processes, and outdated systems, all while struggling to comply with changing safety regulations? Enter 10th Street, the all-in-one platform that simplifies driver lifecycle management by bringing marketing, recruiting, onboarding, safety, and retention together in one place. Sign up for a demo today.
All right, up first, we're going to bring Tyler Johnston from Mercer Transportation. He is the general manager of operations. Straight from Louisville, he runs the floor at the owner-operator company known as Mercer Transportation, 47 years strong, 100% owner-operators, north of 500,000 loads a year and 0 company trucks. Tyler Johnston is the general manager of operations, which means from freight market shakes, he feels it before anyone else. Today, he's not here to recruit. He's here to tell carriers and owner-operators the unvarnished truth about what it actually takes to stay profitable and knowledgeable in today's freight cycle. Tyler, welcome to Break Check. How you doing, my guy?
This is exciting. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you sit in the operations chair at one of the largest owner-operator houses in the country. Let's talk about how bad it is really out there for today's owner-operators in 2026. Is it worse than the numbers suggest? Because everyone's trying to say it's honky-dory. We're living in the golden era, but I think they forget some of the key indicators like, costs.
Cost, yes, that you're hitting it spot on. And you said it a minute ago when you said testing the narrative of a super cycle. Let's fast forward when this, whatever you want to call it, super cycle is over with, and what the narrative always is. We know that freight is cyclical. It'll go up, it'll go down, and eventually there'll be an end to whatever we are experiencing, and it'll go back down, rates will go back down. The narrative at that point in time, and we heard it after COVID, we heard it in 2023, we heard it in 2019 when freight dipped. The narrative that's used always is that freight rates are returning to normal. They're returning to a normal pre-COVID level. They're returning to a normal pre-2018 level. 2018 was a great year, and before that it wasn't. It's always this whole idea that it's returning to some sort of normalcy after the super cycle. And what's dangerous about that is the content. The content is that rates are returning back to whatever they were in 2020 or pre-COVID after a super cycle's finished. It is dangerous to take content out of context. The context of the content is the fact that operating a business is nowhere near what it was or what it was like 4 years ago or 4 years into the future. Costs have gone up. Inflation has gone up. The cost of doing business, wages, anything you can think of goes up and rises. So when you have a market that is rising and falling, it's dangerous to lean on the present time without looking at the bigger picture, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And, when a load pays $3 a mile and an owner-operator has to deadhead 120 miles to go get it, what does it actually do to take-home pay and fuel and insurance and truck payments after that all comes out? It's no longer $3 a mile. And I think people forget that if they're focused just on the one thing, which is the rate. The rates are normalizing, in my opinion. I don't consider this a super cycle. I don't consider it a golden era. I think we're finally starting to climb, and that's a reason to celebrate, but it's a farce to sit there and celebrate too early that we're in a super cycle or a golden era.
Exactly. And people get too caught up and it's really kind of scary to watch people chase the dollar. I tell my folks all the time and we preach it day to day. And just like you used in your example about the deadhead, you need to know your cost. You need to know your variable cost. You need to know your fixed cost. You need to know what it takes to run your business, because the main thing that you should be focused on in trucking, especially owner operator trucking, is creating consistency. Don't chase dollars. Create consistency. Consistency will produce efficiency, and efficiency produces profitability. So, this idea that we're going to go out there and chase this money and not know what the cost is to put into our business and all that, it's a dangerous way to operate, and especially if you're running wild, buying and spending and not saving and not putting back towards your business. Because what rises falls. I mean, that stands true every cycle that we've experienced. So whatever we're experiencing, yes, rates are catching up and we're seeing lots of good things. People need to be smart within that environment. Create consistency, be efficient, learn efficiencies in your business, and you will be profitable, especially in what we're seeing right now.
So we live in a world where certain groups of people, services, they've mastered the art of separating carriers and owner-operators from their money. They benefit greatly from finding ways to do that. Do you think that that's why these certain groups are out there touting a victory lap, like go out, spend more, buy now? It seems like I'm walking into a used car sales lot and they're just trying to find a way to successfully separate people from their money prematurely. And the last time we saw something like that, well, we saw the repercussions of those decisions. Remind everyone about the used truck market a couple years back.
Yeah, exactly. And the used asset market in general, trailers almost doubled a few years ago in what they cost. But we have a local U-Pick apple orchard that I take my family to, and every time we go there, I end up buying breads and sugar donuts and apples and this and that. And every time I leave, I say, boy, they are sure good at taking $1 off a man. And that reigns true. I mean, these people that are out there selling the used parts, they see opportunity. And of course, opportunity should produce some sort of instinctual way to grow your business and not pry. I don't want to say pry, but the opportunity exists to sell to trucks, companies, owner operators. I think that noise will always be there in a good or a bad market. You look, here we'll give you an example. Look at horse racing. We're in Louisville, Kentucky, home of the Kentucky Derby. Horse racing, horses run with blinders on for a reason. You don't want them to be distracted from what the goal is. Everybody knows they're in a race. The horse knows they're in a race. The blinders are there to keep the horse focused on the race itself. I watched recently, it was the coolest video. I watched 1973 Secretariat run. It was one of the greatest races of all time, but that horse didn't stop. He wasn't focused on anybody else. He wasn't focused on the noise. It just kept going, and he ended up winning by like 31 lengths. And it was the most miraculous, best horse race of all time. But it's a testament to, we all live in some sort of world that's like that. And we're all going and driving towards a goal. We need to have blinders on. We need to know what we are in, but we need to keep going after it and, training the good train and going after our own goals, right?
No, I love that you compared that, us, the carriers in this right now, staying focused, keeping our blinders on, not paying attention to the noise. Because there are people out there saying it's more like basketball. Just keep shooting, keep spending, keep growing. How dangerous is it to take that kind of mindset to an operation like a trucking company in a market like this, where we're still being crushed by margins, and people that don't have to pay those bills simply don't understand that pressure when you have to choose between maintenance and food on the table, when you have to choose between payroll and paying yourself as a business owner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you're going to be spending and buying and spending and buying, you better know what game you're playing in. You better know what exactly you're spending for and what it's going to do to your business. And you need to know your environment. You need to know your surroundings. I'm not saying it's just an awful thing to spend and buy, but it's absolutely a bad thing to make a knee-jerk reaction 3 months into whatever you want to call this, and go out and put yourself into a whole bunch of debt and not understand what game you're playing at. So that's when the education piece comes in. You need to know your business. You have to know your fixed costs. You have to know your variable costs. You got to know the people that are involved in this business, what it takes to run. I'm talking things like insurance, equipment costs, maintenance costs, preventative maintenance, stuff like that. All of that costs money. And if you're not prepared for that, when the times are good, you may be able to afford it, but we all know this is a cyclical industry. Things will go up, things will go down. It's better to run, create consistency and run efficiently and have those blinders on.
Now let's talk golden eras and super cycles for a minute. Everybody's throwing around the term freight super cycle, golden era of freight. Everything's awesome. From the seat of Mercer, what would actually have to happen for you to be willing to use any of those phrases describing today's freight market?
Oh, wow. We would need to see consistent turnaround. We would need to see some insurance reform. We are seeing some good things regarding capacity and some legislation and things around that nature. So the industry is starting to, people are starting to take notice of the industry, and that's a good thing. I'm not sure that we're ever willing to just call something a freight super cycle. I think that they're in organization like ours, we absolutely see times to capitalize on a good environment, a good operating environment. I will never forget, in 2018, I was at a industry seminar, and they had two battling economists, is what they called it. And if anybody remembers, it was trucking in 2018. It was great. Everybody was paying dedicated rates, and you were deadheading back to shippers to go get loads, and everybody was making money, and it was a great cycle. And these battling economists at the seminar, one was from Harvard, one was from another prestigious school. The idea that they were battling was one was supposed to be an optimist, one was supposed to be pessimistic on the market. And the optimist was absolutely convinced that this 2018 freight boom was going to last until the third quarter of 2020, and here's why, and here's the data and analytics and da-da-da. And I'm sitting in the audience listening to this. And then the pessimistic man said, no, you're wrong. I think it's only going to last to the first quarter of 2020. But we're going to make it to the first quarter of 2020. And I'm sitting back in the audience. I'm thinking, how do these guys know this? How is this? I've been in the industry. This was 2018. I've been in it for roughly 10 years. How are they this smart that they know this? Then the first quarter of the 2019 happened, and the freight market collapsed. I don't want to say collapsed, but it went down very quick. And I realized that no one can predict what we have going on. You have to have a dance of a combination of consumer spending and economic boom and capacity constraints in order to be able to accurately depict or predict what's going to happen in our industry. We need to focus on ourselves and how we're conducting business and capitalize on opportunity in the industry that we survive in.
It's almost like we've heard advice like that before. It's almost like every operations leader in existence has said that to every owner operator in existence for any length of time. But all of a sudden, when it comes to ourselves and we have to look in the mirror, we forget the very basic advice that we give.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And we forget that, you want to preach this, go out there and make money and save and do that. And then you see the numbers on all the ghost capacity that exists in our market, and how owner operators, especially, and trucks in general, they kind of cap out on the money that they want to make in a year, and they don't work harder and make more. They just kind of work maybe a little bit less and cap out at this magical figure. So we're always kind of competing with ourselves and always kind of trying to hammer it into ourselves to be able to capitalize on a good market. Go out there, make hay, be efficient, have your blinders on, don't listen to the noise. But it's almost like a golf swing. It's really hard to remember all of that stuff and put it into good practice every single time. But that's what we're trying to do.
So let's talk about some of the past years. A lot of people keep referencing certain things. I've heard, look at 2003 because you can't pay attention to anything past that. And I'm like, well, that seems convenient if you're trying to paint a narrative. Or look at 2021 versus now. We've heard a lot of buy now before you miss it without looking back. What lessons should carriers have learned from what happened in 2021? And why should someone want to compare us now to 2003 when nothing is the same now versus 20 or 2003?
Yeah, I think that people have to. First off, you shouldn't ever jump into something just because someone tells you to, or someone's screaming at you buy now. You need to be an expert of your industry and know what you're getting into. Freight cycles like this, or any other cycle, regardless if it's caused by a pandemic or it's caused by an economic boom or a capacity crash. Freight cycles are always like pulling a rubber band back and then releasing the tension on the rubber band. There's always going to be this reverb depending on what the freight cycle is. In COVID, we saw a bottleneck of shipping. Nobody was shipping. And then the tension released and freight rates were great. And everybody was getting yelled at to buy a truck and get into trucking and get this new big expensive lease truck because you're making all this money. And yeah, for a moment it was, because the rubber band got released and went in the other direction. But the reverb and will continue to happen until there is a normal level of freight and capacity and consumer spending and all of that. So I think just being educated into the industry in which you're getting into and knowing why you're doing the things you're doing, not making purchases because someone's screaming at you and you got your blinders off for the moment, making purchases because you won that contract. It's a 3-year lifespan and you know that the contract will support the purchase that you just made. Things like that. That's the good part of doing business in an industry, especially when there's opportunity out there to make money.
Absolutely. So let's talk about having a real market vision, taking off the beer goggles of freight and putting on some glasses so we can see what's happening out there clearly. Mercer talks to thousands of owner operators all the time. Are owner operators suddenly making money hand over fist, or are they still being squeezed by today's operating costs? What's their general temperature check?
Absolutely squeezed by operating costs. Insurance is a huge one, and preventative maintenance and equipment costs. They're absolutely still being squeezed, and that's what when I go back to the beginning and taking the content, standing on content alone that freight rates are great, and taking it out of the context that doing business is more expensive than it's ever been before, is a dangerous route to take. Yes, owner operators, now that rates are starting to catch up and align better with the cost of doing business in trucking, it's not because the cost of doing business in trucking is high that freight rates are aligning better, but freight rates are aligning better with the cost of doing business in trucking. I think that it's helping, but they're absolutely still being squeezed in a market. And I think our industry, there is no end to that. The generational truck driver is kind of dying off, and now what we have is an entrepreneurial spirit in trucking. We have people that want to go out there and be their own boss and make their own money and do the thing. And now, more important than ever, it's up to operations like Mercer's and organizations like Mercer's and others to educate and help assist people navigate this world that we live in trucking that's nowhere near whatever it was in 2003 and neither is the world. The economy and society in general is not where it is.
So let's talk about what's working and what's not. Over the last 6 months, we're halfway into this year. Over the last 6 months, in your opinion, what's still broken and what needs to be improved upon for us to see a noticeable, sustainable change where you're confident in the direction of freight?
Yeah. So one of two things has to happen, or two things in general have to happen in order to have a good freight market. There either has to be good economic valuation. We need to have a good economy, okay, and people need to start building and shipping and doing that thing. So that's one thing. The other thing that has to happen, or the other thing that has to happen, is capacity has to be lower than what the economic threshold is for trucks to be on the road. What we are seeing right now is not an economic boom. Consumer spending, consumer demand is not super high. It's just kind of an average economy on the trucking side. We're seeing some good things in the AI space, and the data space, and things like that. But we need it to sustain at that level we need one of those two things to happen. Capacity needs to go down or freight needs to go up, or both need to happen. And we're keeping a close eye on both of those things. It just hasn't done enough yet, right?
So there's a lot of things that exist today that simply didn't exist 20 years ago. Some of those things that come to mind are nuclear verdicts, insurance costs, fraud, equipment prices, interest rates, broker liability, compliance costs. Everyone that doesn't know what they're talking about focuses on just the rates, but the people that really understand freight, that really understand trucking, they're also focused on these things plus volume. Outside of these things, I mean, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, volume still isn't there yet. Like, we see the rates climb, but so is the cost. But the volume hasn't really substantially increased to build any confidence.
Right. And that's what it's not building, is the confidence. Okay. So yes, capacity has decreased a little bit, and we all know the news on what's happening there. Rising insurance costs, nuclear verdicts, those things are all real. And those are worlds that we have to live in and we have to be able to navigate. But the volume is not there. The freight volume hasn't increased the way we necessarily want it to. Rates are climbing because of other things, and yes, the market's good right now, but it's entirely, in my opinion, too early to determine some sort of super cycle scenario that's going on. And even when you do determine a super cycle, the end word in that is cycle, meaning it doesn't last. It's not forever. You have to be able to navigate an organization and an industry to be able to know your business and your efficiencies and your consistencies. That's what's most important in all of this.
So can rates improve while freight demand remains relatively soft, or is that kind of one of those mirage effects that people get distracted on and they need to put those horse blinders on?
No, they can improve as long as customer support stays the way it needs to be. As long as capacity diminishes, freight rates can improve. So if capacity diminishes still and we continue to kind of clean up things and make that better, then there's not going to be enough trucks to deliver the goods, even in a normal economy. Now, if the economy takes off and there's a big boost there and capacity diminishes, we have a great scenario on our hands where freight rates are going to go crazy. But we're not seeing that yet. So yeah, and volume is consistently going up. Freight rates are consistently going up, but more so what we're feeling the effects of is a diminished capacity.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up, because that's what a lot of people are hanging their head on, this diminished capacity, this enforcement, this legislation. They think fewer trucks automatically means a freight boom. But the problem with that is it's very volatile. Legislation can be challenged. Capacity can change overnight. We've seen it. And right now there is an exodus of people from the industry being removed. But at any point, at a state by state level, this can open up and that can dramatically change everything. So that's volatility, and trucking loves volatility. It responds oh so well.
Yeah. And you said it. People out there think that a diminished capacity means a freight boom. No, a diminished capacity means diminished capacity. A freight boom means a freight boom. And the volatility exists truly on both sides. And a good economic year can only last a year. And we've seen that before. We've seen the economy collapse on multiple times or consumer demand and spend collapse on multiple things. Same with capacity. We've seen the 2021s happen when people go out and buy all the trucks and they listen to all the noise and then all of a sudden there's an influx of capacity and not enough freight in the market for the trucks to haul. So both things are very volatile. But people need to know what they're saying when they say it, because you just said it correctly. Diminished capacity does not mean a freight boom.
All right, so I want to go to your hard stop question. I want to get your Mercer vision on this. What numbers do you need to actually advise people to watch before they can say the market has fundamentally changed? Like, if you had to pick two things that they should be watching closely before they have that kind of confidence, what are those two things?
So I don't know how long it's been around, but tender rejection rates, and honestly, I don't know how long FreightWaves Sonar watching that, the tender rejection index. But that's a very good indicator that I like to watch personally. And there's multiple different things that you like to look at. I like to look at capacity exiting the market. I like to look at capacity entering the market, along with the freight index and where that is on, and keeping up with some of what's going on in the world and politics and in our own economy. You can kind of put your finger on and start to predict stuff a little bit. But I think keeping an eye on everything equally, capacity entering the market, capacity leaving the market, the reasons why that's happening, as far as, is it legislation? Is it just people going out of business? And along with freight and consumer spend and consumer demand and tender rejection rates, those are all really, really good indicators so that you can kind of determine where your play is in the market. Now, we all haul trucks, and trucking companies and transportation companies all haul different types of goods. We all provide a service for different types of goods. So I think keeping your eye and finger and nose on the grindstone to your individual business and its route is something that you need to absolutely pay attention to. If you haul building materials, you need to look at how the housing market's doing and what's happening there, or the data centers or whatever you're into. So it's a combination of things, and I don't know. I apologize. I don't know that there's the hard stop number, but I think keeping a good working knowledge of all of that combined provides you at least with the fundamentals to start making predictions and making decisions. I had a guy tell me. I'm sorry. One more thing. I had a guy tell me one time that data is just numbers and gobbledygook. It's until data can be turned into information to influence decision making, that's when it becomes of value. So I think putting all of these things together and turning them into information in order to influence decision making is where the importance takes place.
Now, one more question before I let you go. What would have to happen over the next 6 to 12 months before you'd say, okay, this is beginning to look like a super cycle or golden era?
Further capacity diminishment, looking at that thing, and then looking to see how the economy does, looking to see what consumer demand is and consumer spend is, keeping an eye on that side of the thing. Looking at tender rejection rates, seeing those sustained at a very high level. I think by the end of this year, you can start to really hone in on what sort of sustained cycle we are in. Whether we call it a super cycle or not, I'm not sure, but we can look to create some sort of prediction, I guess you would say.
All right. Well, Tyler, I super enjoyed this conversation. Appreciate you painting a picture so people could be educated and just spend wisely. Because we are in a market where people are really good at finding creative ways to separate carriers and truckers from their money. So I always want to educate and inform people on best practices, but also entertain them along the way. So thank you for helping me achieve that today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I loved it. Anytime.
Well, that's Break Check. I'm going to go back to my vacation vibes and some lake life. But in the meantime, we're going to close it out with the same way we always do. Here's some more Summer Chrome.
Walking like a man, hitting like a hammer. She's a juvenile scam. Never was a quitter, tasted like a raindrop. She's got the look. She goes. She's got the look. Welcome back to the loading zone. Today's deep thought: trucks